Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's conversation, Investing 101, Understanding Your Investors. My name is Daniel Nzueto. I welcome all pronouns, and I serve as a community engagement manager at Startout. I'm excited to welcome you to today's event. If it's your first time attending one of our workshops, welcome. And know that Startout's mission is to increase opportunity and success for LGBTQ plus entrepreneurs. I'm grateful to welcome back our hosts for today's session, Divya and Karan from Joyus Studios. The floor is yours, Karan and Divya.
Hi, welcome everyone. My name is Karan Singh and my partner is Divya Tak. We did a series of in let me just remove this little pop-up. There we go. We did a series of workshops with Startup earlier this spring that we're looking at Gen AI, and we're really excited to show another side of our expertise and business with you today. So what we'll be talking about is thinking about the money as you get it from investors. How do you think about where you're going to be getting your money? How do you think about when it makes sense to finish your raising? And how do you think about what are the sources depending on where you are in your business? But first, just a little moment about Joyus. So Joyus is a storytelling consultancy. And what we do is we help companies and people tell their stories. And in today's world, that means it's bringing expertise in social media, it's bringing expertise in the actual art of building a narrative. But it's combining the different skills that we're excited to have as part of our team, which is design as well as marketing, as well as just the skill of building things, so whether that means a product or an actual narrative around a product. So as I mentioned like a few couple of minutes ago, this is what we're going to be doing today. So thinking about how we take our ideas forward, where are those sources of investment, and how do we interpret the feedback as we get it? And this is a presentation. I'm going to be asking some questions. So if you'd like to drop it into a chat, it would be really helpful for us. But there's also a scenario that I'm going to be taking through as we have this conversation. And the scenario involves this gentleman named Mike, who's trying to open a lemonade stand. And he needs some amount of capital initially to get started. And he has some sense of what the market is willing to support. And the market here is willing to support 10 cents per lemonade. So where can he start to think about where he can get the capital to be getting going with this initial idea? As you think about those sources, they're going to fall into different buckets. And one of the ways I really like to think about it is how much likelihood would these people have to invest in a similar business? If they didn't know me, would they be investing in this business, right? And so that's where you can start to differentiate the different groups because sometimes things might start to feel like they overlap a little bit. Maybe you have an uncle who also does angel investing. Maybe you have other people in your orbit who also start to fall into these other groups. That's where feels to me like a very nice way to kind of carve it out. Would they invest in something similar if they didn't know you? We're going to be talking through these different groups as we go through today. So, one of the things to also keep in mind, though, is that when people do know you, that means these relationships sometimes will have more obligations. And what that can mean is there's going to be different levels of understanding, different levels of just experience in investing, experience with the notions of what it really means to be putting your money on the line. And because of that, they're going to look differently at the check that they give to you. Now, this is actually an experience that I had. Oh, excuse me. I'm having long hairs, but sometimes you just find it in your mouth. um, but an experience that I just had while helping a very good friend of mine, who her name is Fran, and she founded with her wife this company called Tomboy X, which is a queer underwear brand out of Seattle. Really an amazing company. And we were doing a recapitalization a couple of months ago where the business just needed to get an influx of money in. And so we went back to a lot of the early investors and we said, hey, this is a recapitalization. It is a down round. So your investment is not quite worth what it was a few years ago. And that was a really hard conversation for some of the people that wrote that first check. Right. Like I was with her in a lot of those conversations. And particularly one stands out to me, the lady that really wrote the first check for Tomboy X. And she was just like, I feel like you guys have kind of betrayed me in some ways where you're telling me that like the money I put in now will have a higher upside than the money I put in earlier. And that, I had an opportunity a few years ago where I could have sold some of my shares and I didn't do that because I really believed in you. And now it feels like, why did I believe in you? Right. And so that kind of thing starts to really happen when people don't have as much experience in that kind of investment field, when this is only their kind of first investment or they're really doing it from obligation or really doing it because they care about you. Sometimes that can come with where now you've put a burden on your relationship. And it's just something to keep in mind. And that's why we kind of highlight it in this way on this slide, that those relationship obligations sometimes can be really high when you are getting those checks from people who have not done as much kind of sophisticated investing, or just any investing, really. It doesn't have to be sophisticated, but just that notion, have they done kind of, 10 investments and this is their 11th, or is this really their first one or first real one? So that all said, though, it's really hard to actually get that first check. And it's a situation I've been in a couple of times, and I've been with my friends as well. So let's go back to Mark. And how does Mark think about this, right? He needed that $30. He goes out and talks to his people, talks to his friends, talks to the neighbors, people who know him, and he gets back this kind of feedback. Now, how do we interpret something like this? Right? Parents are given $5, to uncle two, neighbor zero, right? And this is the nice when here's the nice little model that we like to share about this kind of notion, right? That there's kind of a threshold that people need to get to be willing to put money into this. And some of that threshold is going to come because of the relationship. Some of that threshold is going to come because of the idea. And the place to look to try and understand, is this money coming because of the idea, is not in your closest circle. Right, that can really, it can give you a false sense of security, a false sense of reinforcement, because your closest circle, there's so much relationship value there that they're going to be willing to invest in you even if that idea is not quite strong enough. Right, so really when you want to understand, is there a good, am I getting good market signal from this? Am I getting a signal that's useful for me to be able to say, oh, I know I can invest more of my time in it, I can go out and really put my efforts in behind this idea. You want to be looking outside of that kind of immediate first circle. So that's what Mark does. So he's like, I haven't really gotten the sense that my idea is there. So maybe I need to revise this, right? So now we're going to go into strawberry lemonade. We're going to go organic. And now suddenly we're getting, oh, people are willing to give you some goods here. You're a little bit stronger money. Maybe the parents are similar, but that's kind of they want to be equal with their kids. Who knows what's happening? Um, but now we can see, right? The idea strength has really come up, and that's getting more people over the threshold. So this is a good. We have some hope for Mark. And really, at any point, guys, we're happy to stop and shout out if you have some questions or anything. But now here's the question: do we keep going, right? So we've gotten some good reinforcement on the idea strength, and now there's some ideas we have where it's like, shoot, we could be investing more into this, right? We could be like saying, hey, I don't want to have to be juicing by hand. I could be getting some things that are going to help us do higher quality, maybe like some sort of, all sorts of juices out there. So should he keep going? Any thoughts here?
It feels a little bit like a trap that I think a lot of founders fall into, where you're like, I'm making some money, but I could make more money if I keep working at it. And I've seen it in some spaces, it's successful. Lemonade business doesn't have a huge risk associated with it. And we're talking about $50, but when this is 50, $500,000, $5 million, yeah, I think it's an interesting thing to decide what the risk analysis is around it.
Thank you, Danny. That absolutely. And for those not looking at the chat, Alan also had a good thought, right? Which is just how do we think about the cost today versus the future payoff? Um, Happy. Any other thoughts? I have a little slide for some hints just to kind of give us some thinking rooms, but please continue to shout out. We would love to spend a couple of minutes here because I think this is an important part for us to think about, and if you want to talk about it in your situation, happy to kind of talk through that a little bit here as well. But I do think it's an important part for us just to like stay for a minute and just think about, right? Because it's a really hard decision. Like again, I there was a company that Vivian and I work together at Joyus Studio, but I actually started a really small, it's really, I guess, like an investment partnership, not quite even like a small firm, but it's called Tres Monos Capital with two of my friends in 2017. And one of our early investments, the gentleman who did it's a company out of Seattle called Humanly that now has just raised a bunch of money and they're really on a tear and it's really exciting to see for them. But about 2 years ago, he was raising a much smaller round, and there was this investor group from Austin that kind of approached them and really wanted to put in, if I remember correctly, double what he was trying to raise in that round. And the CEO was really torn, right? And we ended up speaking about it quite a bit. And in the end, he decided not to, because one of the big things is like the valuation of the company here is so much smaller than it could be in the future. So when you give away more money earlier on, when you take in more money earlier on in the company's life cycle, you're going to have to give away more of your company. And if you can raise that money later when the company is just worth more, that just means that you have to give away less of your company. And that was the decision point for Preem, was just like, hey, we can't, I don't want to be left with like 30% of the business that I started. Um, I was just reading what Danny wrote also. Yeah, so I think we spent a little bit of time here. I hope everyone's gotten a little bit sense of it. But maybe just to kind of, I think we talked about that first one. The second one is right. Just one of the key things to kind of keep in mind is, depending on the business you're doing, this may be your first raise. This may be the raise to get you to an initial point, which is maybe a proof point of your product being in the market. This may be a proof point of saying that, hey, we've been building this product in a capital or very labor intensive way, and we're trying to get to an efficiency. But there may be the raise may be at a certain point where you can see that there's a future raise coming for you, and that will be one where you don't want to have used up all of your accessible financial capital for this one. So keep that in mind, right? Like, what is the proof point you're trying to get to today? How much money do I need to get to that proof point? And what kind of relationships and financial capital do I want to go after for that, knowing that there may be more for me that I need to get access to in the future. And then what we mean by that last question here is that there's certain people who are very much feeders. And this is a concept I'm going to come back to a little later on. But getting them in now, getting them on your cap table, getting them on your board, whatever that means, getting them as an advisor is going to help you in your next raise. It's going to help you make that introduction to a VC firm that invests in your sector. It's going to help you have more credibility when you're going to different kinds of angel groups. But that's the kind of thing you want to think about, is what's going to increase your optionality. So maybe it means that, even if like going to that incubator or applying for someone and you're annoyed that you're going to have to give them 2% of your company or 5% of your company, but it's going to increase that optionality for you for your 2 years raise from now, and you don't already have those relationships, that could be a real value that you want to keep in mind. And that could be a reason why you might raise or allow people in that give more money than what you were originally looking for. Okay, let me carry on. Take a quick sip of my coffee. Mm. All right, so Mark's doing real well. And now they're going to go out and try and actually make this business into a business. Mm, I'll come back to that, Alan. Thank you. But where I wanted to talk to about just right here is, this is a point where now you're starting to maybe, depending on who's Mark's neighbors are as well, we'll keep that aside, but maybe you're raising more money than you might have in your immediate circles. So now what do we do, right? And this is the point that we want to start thinking about that third group, which is that angels and the angel syndicates and angel groups as well. So here I'm giving you kind of three big rough categories of types of angels, right? So the operator angels are people who are going to have they've been running a business, right? Like, I have a very good friend whose name, that doesn't matter, but he was a co-founder of Rover. And he would be looking at, considered an operator angel, right? He made several $1 million when Rover went private. And so now he's trying to figure out places that he can go and like do something good, help startup founders who are trying to like do similar things to him, who feel similar to him. He doesn't want to spend a lot of time thinking about it, right? But he wants to feel like it's a number that feels okay to him. And so that's, right, yeah, 10, 20K, maybe 50K, maybe 100K if you really love it, right? Those are kind of numbers that would feel okay for someone like him, but he doesn't want to put a ton of time into thinking about it. But the extra value you get from people like that is their network, their reach into people who are going to help you for hiring, or they're thinking about how you're going to be able to evolve your product and get your product better. So depending on your sector, it can be really useful to chase some of those kinds of people. Similar kinds of people, but different kind of domain, is these kinds of who are domain experts, right? And these will be people who have built themselves as credibility, but really in a sector. And so that is a place where you're going to be getting a smaller check size likely than you would from these kind of operator angels or super angels, but they're going to be giving you the kind of credibility. You can think about it, I'm sure, no matter where we're from, like all of us would know that there's certain names, certain chefs in our cities that their names, if they're attached to a restaurant, that restaurant is going to get some hype, it's going to get some notice. It doesn't even really matter if it's the same type. They may be like, I don't know, doing Thai, but they decide to do an experimental pizza place and people will still pay attention just because they have that kind of hype. Getting those kinds of people to attach themselves to it can be really useful. Uh, um, I'm actually at a poetry workshop right now in Boulder, Colorado, and Ann Waldman is the co-founder of our school, who's one of the beat poets from she's 80 years old, and she just had a movie come out, and we went to the premiere, and on Wednesday, and she got Martin Scorsese, excuse me, to attach his name to the film, largely just to get that reach, right? Because they were friends, and now it gives her the additional credibility. Anyway, coming to that last category, right? And these are people who are now really investing into their notion of saying, this is what I'm doing with this sector in my life, is I'm trying to really be an angel. And now I want people to look to me as being, I'm a source for deals. I want my name, want my stamp on it to mean something. So they're trying to amass that list of saying, I was invested in this company, and this company, and this company, and this company, and they all did really well. Excuse me. So they're really looking to try and build their reputation. If you have some of those in your network, that can be great. They will also likely have people that they're looking to as their signalers and saying that these are people I want to come back to. Excuse me. One of the interesting new phenomenons that has started to happen is through AngelList, AngelList.com. They have an arm called venture.angellist.com, and people have built reputations as having these venture groups, having these AngelList syndicates, as they're called. I'm probably part of maybe like 4 of them, and it's different people will send out to you deals. So I maybe get 3 to 4 deals a week from these different like super angels, effectively, right? They're just people who have built their reputation, and now they have people that they're sending out these deals as they find them, and people send them to them. So that's an interesting evolution that's happened in the last 3 or 4 years. It really goes hand in hand with my next slide, which is these kind of syndicates. But it's interesting because you're starting to see this blurring of the lines between what was, is it just one person? If it's one person who then gets money from their friends, is it still considered one person? Well, if they're now getting it from like a bigger group, is it still one person, or are they actually becoming a syndicate at some point, uh, or considered that way? Um, thank you, Alan. So I just wanted to pause a little bit and define some of these things that I may have been running around and saying that maybe we were not all super familiar with. But as I just kind of mentioned, a syndicate is a group of people who would decide to invest based on the opportunity. This is different than a venture fund. So in a venture fund, I will have given, in both cases, I would be considered an LP, a limited partner. But in a venture fund, I have given them the money up front, and I do not have control over whether or not my money goes into whatever investment the general partners decide. In a syndicate model, the general partner is sending out the information, sending out the deck, sending out their analysis of the deal to their group of limited partners who all individually make their decision about whether or not they want to invest. So that's why this growth of something like the ones on AngelList is kind of expected in this day. People get to feel like they're making the decision, they have their own agency. There's no cost to being as part of them. You just get the deals and you get to decide. And it just fits nicely with kind of the world we live in of very individual decision making. Anyway, coming to the words on this slide. So here again, I'm just kind of giving you 2 rough ways of breaking up. I'm not going to say I'm being exhaustive in kind of the syndicates, but maybe a vast majority of syndicates. So tend to be values focused ones. Honestly, there's a lot that are starting to, I would just say, like, be more cognizant of some of the historical discrepancies in venture. So one of the big discrepancies, which many of us hopefully are now aware of, is that something like 2% of venture capital in the US in a given year goes to women. It sometimes has gone up to 5, but it is a vastly underfunded group. I mean, it's a part of our population, part of our community, and there's similar sort of numbers about many minorities. And so depending on the kind of problem you're trying to solve, is it for one of those groups? Do you belong to one of those groups? Do you have a co-founder or someone in your leadership who is part of one of those groups? That can be something that makes that more accessible to you. And then similarly, we see some that have started to come out because of people's previous work. So that could be, you may have heard about like, the PayPal mafia, that perhaps in this group is no longer um, something we like to talk about as openly as it could includes one of our favorite people, Elon Musk. But the PayPal mafia was a group of a group of people who came out of PayPal, Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, whatnot, and they would be considered a network-based syndicate, right? So there are now people who people would reach out to. They would send it out to their other groups in their PayPal mafia, and they together would make investments. Many of those exist. There's Uber syndicates. There's just different groups of people tied together by a past experience, whether that's an alma mater, whether that's a past work experience. Okay. And again, please give me a shout if there are questions. This is the only reason I didn't answer your question earlier, because I have a whole section about it. But here, I'm going to take us through four different options here, right? So business stand is booming. So one option is he could go out and sell parts of it, right? Sell the recipe and sell the rights. And that'd be $200, okay? Then he sees a financial consultant, some clever fellow comes, runs some numbers, and says, hey, you could afford a $50 dividend. So option two. Then option three is he sees a different consultant, and this guy is like, hey, you could sell all of the assets to the stores and let them now run the stores independently. And these will give you an option to maybe make that a little bit more clear, actually, because I don't want to get lost in the abstract. So I'm trying to think of a store that would be, I don't know, like maybe a store that's not too common, whatever. Fine. Let's say a McDonald's, right? So like, let's say McDonald's decided to, as they did, exit a country, right? So that would be giving the option to all of the franchisees to say, hey, we're going to give you the rights to contact our vendors directly and own the marketing in this particular area and use all the branding. You would have the right to do all of that, and you would generally constrain it. So you would be like, you have the right for this particular area. And then they would be able to buy that from you and then be able to continue to operate their business in that area, right? So that's kind of what I'm talking about here, is that notion that you would be able to sell the assets, sell the rights to keep running the business to the franchisees. And I'm wondering actually if I maybe went a little bit fast on those first two. So maybe I'll give you a little bit more detailed examples on each of these, and then I'm gonna give you the fourth one. So this first one, right? So we're saying that he could remember he had that exclusive
Um,
strawberry lemonade recipe. Sorry, Divya, go ahead.
Maybe we should also like set the context of like what you're trying to talk about is you have built the business, you have maybe raised some amount of money and the business is successful. Now, what are the it has been a year, 2 year, 3 years, whatever. Now what happens to the founder? What kind of decisions are in front of them when they are looking for future paths, especially when they're thinking about, okay, if I don't want to do this anymore, where do I go and what do I do? So like these options are all for that.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Sorry. No, thank you, Divya. That is a very helpful thing. Sometimes when you've thought too much about the narrative, you keep part of it in your head. So yes, in my mind, Mark was a young man, and so this is the moment, right? He's off to college, or some sort of pivotal life moment has happened, and so he's looking to say that, hey, this business no longer makes as much sense for me. But the business is doing really well. So that is the context in which I'm now trying to say that these are the options of how do you think about it, right? Like you've built these different assets in the business. How do you think about what to do to give a return to the people who believed in you, but maybe not lose the thing that is your child and is your baby? Yes, thank you, Divya, for pausing me there. So, okay, I think I've spent a long time on this particular side, right? But this would be the notion that you're selling it to someone else who may or may not decide to run it, right? Like they could easily be selling it because they want to buy you out and they want to shut you down, right? So they're taking your recipe and they're going to kill your brand. Is often what you would have to assume is going to happen if you're selling it to a competitor who's going to take the rights to the brand. And
I
then this is an
suppose a
option.
lot of
Go ahead,
times
please.
it also happens in PE businesses. So a lot of times when PEs are buying out a business, like this is not angel or that level of money, it is like one level above VC money. But that's why they also end up purchasing. If they have 5 healthcare investments, they're gonna think of like buying three of them just as the cost of killing competition. They'd be like, we could spend money on product, we could spend money on marketing, but we could also just buy out the competition and just like, absorb it or destroy it. Even if you don't want to absorb it, eventually you can just shut the company down if you have the like, major stake in that.
Yeah. Um, and that brings up a really good point that I think is maybe even worth just highlighting for a minute, even though I did not have a real slide about it. But one of the really important things to kind of keep in mind as you're making these decisions is at what point are you giving away so much control that you actually are giving away the decision making of your business? And there's many examples, of places where once you give that away, you have a consultative role. That the example I referenced earlier this year, that my friend who started TomboyX and I were working on, the reason why the business needed a recapitalization is because it took out a loan after it was owned by this venture capital firm that invested in 2019, and they only owned 56%. But 56% is enough to own the decision making, right? And at that point, all you have is a consultative role, even as the founder of your business. So that's just something to keep in mind as you're taking more money, or even as you're thinking about an option like this, right? Like if you commit to paying a dividend, you're committing to paying a dividend, right? And that can be very hard for the business. So you set an expectation to the people who are now receiving that dividend, right? And in this case, in Mark's case, as we all know, it's his neighbors, it's his parents, it's his friends. But so it may be easier for him, but it also can be harder, right? Because these are people it's really hard to break even an implicit obligation to, right? The implicit obligation of, oh, you've been getting this $1 a month or $10 a year or $15, whatever it is. Because now they're like, hey, where is that thing? I was your early investor. How can you be making a decision that stops my dividend or cuts my dividend?
And also this, like just riffing off of what you just said, that's also another thing to think about when you are thinking about relationship strength versus idea strength. And like it's the reverse of what Daniel said about like sometimes people feel like you're not investing in me if you're not investing in the idea. But it's the reverse. Sometimes like if somebody has invested in you, then they would feel like you should be beholden to them. So if like even if they don't have like any, let's say, authorial control over your company, they, if they are really close to you, they will try to advise you in a way that, okay, now you should accept my advice because I have invested in you and we are close enough. So you might have to take decisions which are not necessarily in full interest of your company because you have gotten somebody's money who you have a very strong relationship with, and like refusing to listen to them is going to cause some complications in that relationship.
Yeah, and that aspect, I wish it was always so clear and simple, like oftentimes you're making decisions in incomplete understanding and you're trying to figure out, but it's not like a decision is like, oh, like I'm 100% sure I'm going to do this. It's often like, oh, I'm 52% sure this is the right thing and 48% unsure. To give you another example, my sister runs a clothing rental business out of Seattle called Armoire, and my father has invested quite a bit in it. Right, like my dad is a successful entrepreneur, and he's a great person. He's very good at what he does, and uh, yet though, it's very hard for my sister. Right, she and I have talked about it, where it's like he's our dad, he's like, and we know he's very good at what he does, but also she's running the business, and it just means that it's a place where it's a very hard piece of advice for he when she knows that he thinks a certain thing is the right decision, it just sits with you, right? And because you care about that relationship, it doesn't even have to be that they're telling you for sure, like, oh, I'm going to be mad at you, or I'm going to never support you again if you don't listen to me here. But knowing that there is the advice that they give you sits with you, and it influences the way you think about it. It's the inverse in some ways of the relationship strength. It's the relationship strength going the other direction. It's now that you have such a strong relationship with those people who have invested in, it's coloring the way you're making those decisions and making you feel like, hey, you could take the hurt, but you don't want to cause them the hurt, right? Or you don't want to help them stop. You don't want them to feel betrayed, even if they're not telling you that they're going to feel betrayed, but you're in your mind, you're putting these weights on it. Um, as someone who has done a lot of work with family over the years, I am very aware of these things. At different points, I've worked with my dad, my sister, and my aunt. And I've done consulting work for two of my cousins. So it's been quite a few over the years. But Divya also has built 6 games with her sister over the years. So we have both just jumped into it head first. It's a whole thing. Um, Okay, let me come on to our next slide. Okay, I feel like this was the one I kind of started explaining them a little bit better on. So unless there's any questions on this one, I'll finally show us our 4th slide. Um, okay, and this is that interesting one, right? Which is, one option that you can think about, and many of us do think about when we start businesses, is thinking about succession. And it's interesting because you could argue that it's inherently illogical, right? That you could sell the business for personal profit. Oftentimes, we're founders of our businesses. We own the vast majority of them, right? So we could sell our business for much far more profit than we would get from seeing the business continue. But in a lot of ways, it becomes our babies, right? Like you spend so many hours and so much time in building it that the notion of seeing it continue feels more important than the notion of whatever money that or upside that you potentially are leaving on the table. So that is the option that we're talking about here, right? That, his sister maybe has run one of the franchises successfully. Maybe she's run even 2 of them, right? But now there's an opportunity where he's going off to do something else. And could he start to look and see, is there a place to find a successor here? So hopefully at this point we've put you through enough slides and I've told you enough things that we can have a little discussion on it. Happy if it's in the chat. Happy if anyone wants to unmute and say some thoughts. But I'm also happy to show any of those 4 options again. But what do you guys think? What should we do? What should Mark do?
What
I
does
feel
Mark
like
want to do with his life? Like, what is what are Mark's goals?
So we decided that Mark was started this in, we can say, like, let's say he was 12 and he's now 18 and he's about to go to college. And yeah, that's what we know about Mark right now.
I have a hard enough time answering this for myself. So I'm like, I don't know what Mark wants.
Well, how would you, and maybe let's do that. How would you answer it for yourself? We could answer that, but if you, or even the person that you were at that age, like if you had maybe started this lemonade business, like, and you were about to go off to college, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that you would, maybe it is a lemonade business. Maybe you wouldn't plan a succession plan here.
Yeah, I think lemonade business and going to college, selling the whole thing would be pretty exciting because then it's like you have some money, you could do another thing, or just buy your groceries, Yeah.
So I think that's maybe this one. Okay. Does anyone feel that they would pay the dividend? Alan, were you saying the pay the dividend? Was that what you meant by passive income? Hmm. Janice, were you saying, and I apologize if I mispronounced, but Janice, were you saying you agree with Alan or you agree with what Elena was saying?
I suspect you could do passive income in both cases if you do a succession plan and if you do a dividend. Like you could always do something where it's like, over time. I would get monthly grocery instead of, one time big drop.
Yeah. I think the big question though is in this option, unless you try and engineer both, you're still running the business, and that can be a hard thing if you're trying to go on and do your next challenge. This was a thing that actually I tried to do my junior year of college. I was got this job working for for Microsoft, running the Microsoft Student Partners Program, and it was really crazy because my boss quit, like maybe I was like maybe a month into my internship, right? It was like it's supposed to be a summer job. And so then literally I was running the Microsoft Student Partners Program, which is like this worldwide program. And then we like had to have a summit that fall. And I think it was like the Windows 8 launch, if I remember correctly. And so like we had to help everyone get the content they needed for the Windows 8 launch. And then I kept doing it because like they still hadn't hired anyone. So I like kept doing it into my junior year of college. But it was crazy, like, because I was studying abroad that year in London, and like it just meant that like I kept having like calls at weird hours, and like I couldn't really do anything after most of my first semester because I mean I did like some stuff. I won't say I didn't go out in London, but like I just felt like I was always like felt guilty about like that I felt really responsible for this thing. I think in the way that you do when you're whatever 17, or I guess I was probably 20. But like someone's giving you this responsibility, you feel like you have to own it. And it just constrained my decision making. You know, I didn't do any working in London because I was like, shit, I have this thing I have to be responsible for. So I do think that there is something to be said about like getting rid of the thing. You know, if you want to be able to do something else with your life, it does sometimes make, you know, it is just a lemonade stand. We didn't talk about how many stores there are, so it could have been that maybe there are 10 stores at this point, and you could just sell it off to the franchisees. I feel like honestly, this is an under looked at option a lot of the times. Um, it is in some ways an option that I actually did when I was running a business in India. So I was running an ed tech business for about a year and a half, and that business was about 10 years old, called Vidya Next. And we had a tutoring plus teaching proposition. So our tutors went to students' homes, or students came to their homes, and they used a tablet to keep track of where every student was. And that tablet would generate the quizzes for them and generate the tests, so that the teacher could just focus on teaching, and the students would have the right practice for the level they were at. The big thing that we were about was that the most important thing is to have the right level of practice so the students stay engaged. But we had come from running tutoring centers of our own, so there's a lot of learning material on the tablets, and our teachers, unfortunately, often felt that the tablet was competing with them. And so we peaked at one year, I think we had like 4,000 or 5,000 tutor matches, and we closed that year with 700 active student tutor pairs. And so many of them, like ridiculous amounts, had apparently moved. But what really had happened was that the teachers canceled with us and just kept teaching the students without our tablets because they already knew how to teach, and they felt that why did they pay us, right? So I was in this point where I was like, shit, like we're running out of money. We had some amount more money. I didn't want to go back and get more money from the investors because I didn't really believe that this solution worked because our teachers felt that we were competing with them. And to recast the solution entirely, we didn't deliver enough value for the amount of money we wanted to charge our teachers. So we needed to try and charge less, which meant we just needed to scale everything way back. We couldn't be running radio ads and getting people excited about our solution when we only were making like $10 per student. Like it just didn't, I mean, this was in India, so like the numbers were very small, and we needed to have mass penetration to really make money. So I was really in that situation of like, how do I sell this? So I tried to go out to our biggest competitors and sell it to them. I was unsuccessful. Some of them were interested in our content and our question problems, but they weren't interested in the actual solution. And then when they found out that some of our question problems had been sourced from like, because we had done some content scraping early on, so then they felt that contaminated them. So right, there was this whole like people saw these issues that like we didn't feel they were issues, but like other people didn't give us the value that we were expecting, right? They felt it undercut the value that we deserved, we felt, right? So there was this disconnect that was not solvable. So what I ended up doing was saying that we had this one really successful part of our solution, which was a quizzing tool that you could go out and you would take quizzes. You as a student, right? You could download this anywhere in India, and you would get points that would rank for your school. And we had school leaderboards in every city, which I kind of stole the idea from Harry Potter and how they have like house leaderboards. So I was like, oh, yeah, everyone knows they're competing schools, so. And then after 10 of these quizzes, we asked for your parents' contact information for you to keep playing. And then we would call your parent and be like, did you know your child struggles with these things? So it was kind of manipulative, but it was very successful in being able to help the parents understand. Because a lot of parents in India because of the way that society is, there's tutors, right? There may be someone else, like there may be like a helper or a servant in the house, right, who maybe cooks or something, but also helps watch the kids, especially when they're doing their homework. So you may be very disconnected from where your child is academically. And so sometimes the parents were very surprised to hear that this is where their student was. It was a very successful solution for us. But that was not going to support a 60-person company that was running radio ads, So we ended up spinning that out as a 3-person solution, right? So it became this company called QuizNext. There was 4 of them actually, but and they eventually like got acquired and like had a more kind of successful outcome. I shut down the rest of the business. Um, and I shut it down in March of 2019. So, in retrospect, the world so much changed in 2020 that it's like, who knows, right? Like I could spend forever kind of thinking of how, like, if I'd only lasted for 9 more months or 10 more months, would I be able to see us through in a different way? Because EdTech boomed for a while in the pandemic. But I don't think there's necessarily too much of a point for those things. I was trying to create the optionality for me that I needed at that point, and of the options in front of me, that was the option that felt like it was the best, or that was the option that felt that was the most reasonable. But uh, in some ways, yeah. So it's not quite what I'm saying on the scene, right? I didn't go out and try and sell to all of my tutors, which would have been the equivalent of what is on this slide, right? Is if I had gone to all 4,000 tutors, I think 7,000 tutors that we trained and said, hey, pay me 50 rupees, pay me $1, and I will let you keep a license for this tablet software for using this with your students in perpetuity. That would have been the option that I'm talking about here. Of course, we were building a technology solution, and so the amount of money that we would get from that is unfortunately was negligible, right? Developers are very expensive. So it wasn't something my board would have been interested in putting the resources to try and get us there. But the solution that we did do is spinning that out was something I could get my board behind and was able to kind of take that forward. Which is another kind of key thing I just hinted at here, and something that you will have to always keep in mind as you get more people on this journey with you, right? To kind of run backwards for a second, right? Like once Mark gets his parents and his uncle and his neighbors as these stakeholders in his journey, now that means you have other people who are stakeholders in your journey. And depending on the level of control you've given away for them at that point, it can mean different things. At some point, it will make sense to have a real board. And some people will ask for that board seat as a condition of their, maybe it is one of the neighbors for their $10 and their 20 strawberries. The $10 of strawberries, they're going to want that board seat and want a stake and an ability to have a seat on the table and when you're making those decisions. And a lot of times, I think people have this idea that boards are terrible. I think being proactive about putting the people on your board can just make it a lot better of a situation. You know your strengths, right? And you know what kind of people you can listen well to with. You know what kind of people that you have the ability to not feel defensive or to hear it as feedback. And those are the kinds of people you want to be around. Especially in difficult situations, especially if you value their advice, and especially before you have someone on your board that you maybe disagree with. You want to have someone in your corner, someone on your back. It's just a really useful thing when you do get into those more dodgy situations. Okay, I think I told a lot of stories right there, and I wanted to kind of give us a little bit of time for Q&A. Oh, we're doing well. We have like 5 minutes or so, maybe 10. Also, this is the first of a series, so I would want to, if there are any thoughts, I think, Divya, remind me, what is our next one going to be about?
It's about the different kinds of capital. So like we talked about a little bit about like boards and, the different kinds of investors, but like very cursorily touched upon VC and PE and all of that, but like not all money is equal. And how do you figure out who should you raise from? So should you do an angel round only with your friends and family? Should you do something which is like more further away? Like one of my friends is like, right now setting up a fund, and she has worked in a lot of different finance institutions, and like she just wants to raise an initial round with people who have worked with her. These are people who are in VC and in fintech firms and stuff like that, and she's like, that's all the money I'm never going to raise in future. So just understanding like those kind of things, like if I am going to raise in future, who should I raise from? If I am never going to raise in future, like, who should I raise from? Not all money is made equal. I don't know how true this is in the US, but in India specifically, like the VC ecosystem is very shiny right now. Like everybody wants to raise VC money. Like everybody's like, oh, I raised 2 million and 3 million and 5 million. And it's like you gave away a part of your company. It's not like you made 5 million. Like there is a difference between those two things. But like, should you raise from that? Like, is your business VC able? Is your business PE able? So like, that's what we are going to be talking about. What are the different kinds of money? And not all money is equal.
But we would love also, as especially for those of you who are able to come to a couple of them, as there are certain topics or areas that are more interesting. It's our first time kind of really thinking about this as part of the work that we really do. It's just a place that I have a lot of experience. That also has a lot of experience, and we realized it really informs some of the storytelling. Part of the work I did with Fran, both of us did with Fran, was just helping her clarify what is the investor story, right? So how, as you take this out to people, how do you tell the story of where the business is today? And a lot of that we realized was informed by the decisions, by just the experience that we've had. So that's part of why we wanted to start being able to offering this and just sharing this with people. I think Start Out has been, it's just nice to be able to support other queer people, and people who are allies of the queer community.
Yeah. And
Cool.
also I would say that like it's really easy sort of to initially from the outside be like, okay, I'm gonna raise money. Once I build a company and my idea is somewhere and I have a prototype, I'm gonna start raising. But then the moment you start raising, all of these questions like come up. And this is what the series, so like we are on the first one of 4, and we would love it if like you guys enjoyed it for to come to the next 3.
Cool. Thank you, everyone.
Fantastic.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you so much. As always, you all are fantastic, and we're excited to have this workshop series with you all. I just put into the chat our feedback survey. Please take a minute. It'll also go out via email with the recording. And as they've mentioned, they did another workshop series with us engaging with AI. I'm going to drop the link to that has previous recordings if anybody's interested in some of that content. But thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you all at the next Start Out event. And Divya and Karan, thank you so much for your time. We'll talk to you all soon.
Take care. Thanks, guys.